Joining us now, MSNBC's Vaughn Hilliard reporting from Washington. Joel Payne is a Democratic strategist, former senior aide at Hillary for America, and former press secretary for Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. And Brendan Buck, former aide to House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner, and an MSNBC political analyst. Vaughn, does it tell us anything about Trump's mindset that he is now going after people like Oprah and Beyonce?
And this was just days after he called for the arrest of President Obama and other former Obama administration officials. And the attacks on Oprah and Beyonce, let's be clear, these go back 1 year ago to spurious claims that he was making at the time when the Harris campaign paid the production companies of Beyonce and both Oprah a sum of money for expenses related to events they did on behalf of the Harris campaign. This is normal operating procedure. The Harris campaign at the time denied that there was any money that went directly to Oprah or Beyonce, that their endorsements were not paid for. And in fact, campaign finance FEC reports showed that the money that was spent, and it was far from millions, went directly to their production companies to cover those expenses. I want to let you listen, though, to an exchange that our colleague Kristen Welker had with Senator Lindsey Graham just yesterday about these spurious claims and the calls for investigations from President Obama to Oprah. Take a listen.
Are you trying to rewrite history to distract from the Epstein matter, Senator?
No, I'm trying to let you know and the media know that we found something we didn't know before. At the end of the day, I'm not calling for a prosecution against President Obama for treason, but I am calling for an investigation.
Senator, you're saying there's something new. This report goes back to 2020. It's 5 years old. There's actually nothing new in this report and nothing that changes any conclusion. But I want to talk about Gaza.
Turned over is new to me.
New to me, Lindsey Graham says that, of course, was the unclassified material that was released by Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard last week here. The DOJ says that they have struck up a task force to investigate a potential criminal matter here. But we should be very clear, as well, as that as the president has called for a further investigation into these claims of a years-long conspiracy that Gabbard purported. At the same time, there have been a few specifics in the terms of actual allegations that would be criminal in nature, or how exactly this Department of Justice would go about trying to prosecute what has been very, very unclear in terms of specifics about these allegations. And as it goes for Oprah and Beyonce, Chris, I think we should make it clear there is no alleged criminal wrongdoing against either of these individuals, and what is being alleged by the President of the United States is false and not accurate.
Yeah, non-existent proof. Brendan, there's a new opinion piece in USA Today that basically argues that the Epstein debacle has broken through in a way nothing else has in making MAGA realize Trump is lying. Do you see signs that the people who voted for him are now concluding he doesn't keep his word?
Well, I think there's clear evidence that Donald Trump is worried about that. Obviously, the claims that he's making recently are evidence that he wants to change the subject. Now, I'm not holding my breath that the party is actually going to meaningfully turn on him. And I don't think people are going to say that Donald Trump is lying to them. There have been countless opportunities for people to say that over the years, and that's never really stuck. I think what it can do is take a little of the energy out of people who thought that Donald Trump was there to, uncover things and change the way Washington works, uncover the deep state, all of these things. And their enthusiasm for him might diminish a little bit. He's not going to be held out as the problem here, but they may decide that, look, all of my hopes and dreams that I thought Donald Trump was going to change things are not only not going to happen, but maybe I don't really need to worry about voting for a Republican anymore. And I think that's the real problem for Republicans in the midterms is that enthusiasm gone? Is the magic gone? Is the faith gone a little bit? And that could be pretty significant when we have such narrow margins in this country.
Yeah, and Joel, that is exactly where some Democrats see a potential opening. Congressman Maxwell Frost, Senator Chris Murphy, holding a major town hall in a conservative Republican's backyard this weekend. They spoke for 2 hours, answered tons of questions in front of 750 people in Dayton, Ohio. Here was part of Senator Murphy's message.
This is an opportunity for us, as Maxwell said, to go to those folks here in Ohio, to go to those folks here in Dayton, that voted for Donald Trump because they believed that he was going to make their lives better. There is an opportunity to go out to Republicans here in Ohio and say, you got duped, you got lied to. There's another way. The Democratic Party is here to say, we will focus on costs, we will rebuild our democracy, we will unrig our economy.
Now, to be fair, we don't know how many people in that crowd were actually Trump voters at any point, but in a state with a Republican governor, 2 Republican senators, and a state that voted for Trump by 11 points, essentially, can Democrats there and maybe in other red states make progress with the message? You do have something to fight for, and here's how you do it.
Oh, for sure. And by the way, Murphy, Frost, others, Jasmine Crockett, they're going around the country to do more of these types of town halls and more of these types of direct conversations with constituents. I think they'll be very successful. You know, one thing I would add here, Chris, is I think there's this hot conversation among Democrats about whether or not you think about these things as distractions, right? Like the Jeffrey Epstein piece of it and Trump going on Truth Social and saying just spurious lies about people like Beyonce and Oprah and Al Sharpton. What do they all have in common? Interesting. But I think for Democrats, it's less about is it a distraction and more about having the conversation on Donald Trump's terms. Democrats should not be having any of these conversations on Trump's terms. Trump wants to have them in very much kind of, you go to your red team, you go to your blue team, and I'm going to make this a base. That's not what this is. This is about Donald Trump claiming to be for transparency, claiming to be for free speech, and claiming to be to fight the status quo, and acting against all of those things with his power. And instead of focusing on making life more affordable for you, he's focused on lying about Beyonce and Oprah. And that's not going to make your eggs cheaper. That's not going to make it easier for you and your family to afford the lives that you lead. And it certainly isn't the promise he made to you when he said he wanted another shot at this office. And I think that's a very effective, compelling message.
Joel, I was looking at the new Wall Street Journal poll. It finds that a majority of voters oppose the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. He named it. He pushed it through. Is this the message Democrats should be leaning into, or can they do both? Can they say, he keeps talking about Jeffrey Epstein, but look what he actually did?
They got to do everything because it's all one message. It's not Epstein over here, One Big Beautiful Bill Act over here. It's about priorities. He has power, and he's used that power to transfer $1 trillion of wealth from you, working class people, to the wealthy. He has power. And instead of going after the people who are making your life more difficult, he's covering up for people who are implicated meaningfully in child sex predator rings, and covering up for people like Ghislaine Maxwell, talking about pardoning her. Those are connected. Those don't live in silos. And I think Democrats have to be smart about how to loop those things together and not allow them to become compartmentalized conversations. And I think that's why he's underwater on this, and he's going to continue to be underwater on it, because it's unpopular and because it seems like Republicans loathe the people who put them in power, because that act targets many of the majority makers, the people who are responsible for Donald Trump winning last November. And that's a compelling message.
So, Brendan, Republican Congressman Thomas Massie had a warning for his party about what's going to happen if they don't take action on the Epstein files and getting them released. Let's listen.
This is going to hurt Republicans in the midterms. The voters will be apathetic if we don't hold the rich and powerful accountable.
There is new polling that shows a majority of voters disapprove of Trump's handling of several key issues like economy and immigration, which have typically been strengths. So again, when you combine those two things, what does the Republican Party do now?
Well, frankly, they need to get past this issue. And Thomas Massie, I guess he probably wants Republicans to win. Maybe he's obviously been fighting with Donald Trump. But I think that he should appreciate, and all of his colleagues should appreciate, that advancing this conspiracy any longer only hurts the Republican Party. Now, there is no end to this where everyone is satisfied. I think people need to appreciate the sort of conspiracy here is that Jeffrey Epstein had a bunch of rich Democrat elite donors who were part of this. And until that is proven true, there's going to be people who are just completely unsatisfied. And I don't know that anybody has any evidence to suggest that that's going to come out anytime soon.
They
and
don't.
So while Thomas Massie's demanding, he's demanding this transparency. Transparency of what exactly? I don't think that he knows what's in there. And so as long as something that is put out that doesn't say exactly that, you're just going to continue to have Republicans upset at each other, upset at the administration, again, losing that enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Democrats having the time of their lives with this issue. They're very clearly, I don't doubt that they care about the victims here, but they're very clearly playing some politics here. When they're showing up in your district and talking about them, you should be recognizing that as a sign that they're playing you a little bit. And as long as Republicans keep letting themselves get played, they're going to continue to put the House at risk.